I'm cutting out the bench seat and seat back so I can mark where they go, but I have several weeks of other work to finish before I will be able to permanently install them. I'll be leaving these indexing nails in only until the final installation. I've used the hot wire to cut in notches on this back piece, and now I just need to cut this whole back piece off at the height that's appropriate for the rear there. And you can see here the seat goes down on this side here. I'm going to use that factory edge on the rear, and basically when I put in the support underneath the seat here, it's going to push it up against that to get this thing mostly square. Just like I did on the bottom piece, I'm going to use 2 nails for temporarily attaching this foam to this piece of wood behind it, mostly just to keep it from sliding around and moving up and down on me. And these will be useful for positioning later on when I put this piece back in place. It takes an awful long time for my hot wire to go through 8 feet of foam, and I think on this straight edge here I can get as good of a job with just a razor knife, so we're going to go with the razor knife this time. So while I have the bottom and the back on, I crawled underneath and drew these lines, which are where I need to put support pieces to support them when I'm fiberglassing this main piece here. This rear cedar board will be the kind of center to back support of the seat. I decided it would be easier to build up this heavy-duty structural support out of cedar than fiberglass, certainly much quicker. Probably the fiberglass would have been a little bit lighter weight, but cedar is relatively lightweight for its strength, and it's mostly water resistant, so I don't worry too much about putting it into a boat. So other than the 2 pontoons, this rear bench seat is the largest single piece of my fiberglass pontoon boat. It's, bigger than the 3 deck sections, and it's certainly going to be bigger than the other 2 seats I'll be making. So I have the seat bottom and the seat back cut out of foam, but I'm going to be fiberglassing this whole bench part here first, and just about completely fiberglassing it before I put the bench seat and back on, and then I'll do 1 layer on the outside over the top of them. So I'm going to have to fillet these tubes which support the sun cover at each corner, and then I'm going to be doing the insides of all of these vertical panels, and this little bit here will be the trickiest bit, stickiest bit, and then these 2 pieces here. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to be doing the inside of this panel here, the back panel as well. I'll probably put 1 layer of fiberglass over the cedar, especially the ones that are visible to the outside, but the cedar is pretty strong on its own, so I don't need to reinforce those so much as just protect the outside surface. Alright, this roll is 39 inches long, and from here up and around to there is about 25 inches, so I cut this about 26 inches. So if I fold it in half, I can get 2 pieces. I'll cut down this middle here, but I'll get two pieces that go covering this side and the top. So I'll do one for this one and one for the other one over there. Alright, and then we have to cut a lot of little slits. So, this thing can go over those boards, around this board, and around this board, and down here. And the one at the end here is the trickiest bit with all kinds of cuts to get around the end of this thing. And then that one piece of woven fiberglass is ready to be epoxied. So I'm going to be cutting that type of thing for a whole bunch of places before I get the epoxy out. So for example, this guy here, we've got all kinds of stuff going on. Flip that around, put this under. Actually, we do this one first because it's small. That guy should be up there. There, then put this here. This guy goes under, and this guy here folds over all of them. These guys here, these will be cut off right at that bottom of that edge after the epoxy greens a bit. And this wraps around the bottom like so. This little section here on the inside is going to be tricky and messy to fiberglass around. I'm just going to do it in one shot. I got 2 layers for each of these. So essentially I have 2 layers here cut for the inside of that. And then after I do that, I'm going to be doing 2 layers here for the inside in there. Then I have 2 layers here for this outside here, and this one wraps around. And 2 layers is all that guy's getting, this set here. This tube will have my sunshade down post in it, so it's kind of structural. And today I'm going to fillet it here and there to do these 2 side pieces. Most of the downward weight will be on this little bottom bit down here. That's solvent welded to the whole top bit, but I'm going to be trying to put a whole bunch around this stuff here. And I'm going to be using a mixture of epoxy, and these are the glass beads for volume, and some milled fiberglass for a little bit of extra strength, because I want this to be kind of a structural element, not just a space filling element. And my goal here is to make this transition so I can put fiberglass cloth up here around the tube and then up there without adding any super sharp curves like that, and also to kind of seal this tube into the whole fiberglass. I'm going to be mixing these additives to the epoxy resin in a bag here to try to keep the dust from this stuff from flying everywhere, and also I can cut a corner off the bag and use that as a nice kind of a pipetting or kind of a pastry bag. I've got my dust mask on because these guys make a lot of dust, and I'm going to be doing enough of them that I don't think I'm even going to bother with the scoop. We're just going to be pouring here at this point. So as you can see, this is a pretty big batch of filler I'm mixing up. I already have lines on my cups here. This is a 2-to-1 mixture. Now I might need more than this, but I'm going to start off with this amount. And see how things go. Hardener's been sitting around for a couple of months. The weather changed. Looks a little yellow, but I think it's still fine. I don't need the dust mask for the epoxy, and hopefully once I put the epoxy in the bag and seal it, I won't need the dust mask to mix the things together. And if you're wondering how much this is, it's basically 6 ounces of the resin and 3 ounces of the hardener, so 9 ounces total of epoxy. Now the nice thing about the plastic bag is that the dust doesn't come out. and it's pretty easy to mix. I'll have to see if I have to add more. I'm trying to get to a peanut butter consistency so that I can kind of spread it around and it'll stay in place once I do that. I can see a whole bunch of powder still moving around in there, but it's starting to feel thicker. It's thicker than cake batter. I wouldn't call it peanut butter yet. It's definitely thicker than a lot of the stuff I've done with the glass beads, because I put in quite a few glass beads there. I'm not measuring by weight or volume here for the filler material. I'm just kind of estimating things. And it's possible I'll need more epoxy, but it doesn't really look like it. It looks pretty well covered. Yeah, that's definitely thick enough to spread. That's a good consistency. Alright, I'm going to use a round filleting tool now. I have it generally in place. I have a small one for up here. So let's get the big stuff first. Alright, I'm pretty happy with how that went. You can see the PVC pipe is filleted in there pretty nicely. I'll be able to roll fiberglass over that and around it. This side over here is going to be trickier from an access perspective because I have to reach in there and work in there. Alright, mixing up the filler for the second batch. I'm not being scientific here. Alright, we have 9 ounces of epoxy resin, about that much milled fiber and glass beads. Let's see what consistency that gives us. I'm going to try to keep it in the corner of the bag more this time. If it gets too thick, it's nice to have it already in the corner. Alright, that feels much more liquid than my last batch. It still has some definite viscosity. It's sticking to the bag. I think it was going to flow a little bit more. I need a little more filler, I believe. You want to mix it up enough so that you know all the surface area is covered with epoxy before you add more filler, so you can get a good judge of the consistency. So this is not as thick as last time. I don't want it quite as thick as last time, but I don't want it this thin either. It's kind of sticking to the bag, but it also will still flow and go down. So if I were to put it in there, it would just go and flow. So we're looking for something that'll hold its own shape after I put it somewhere. Alright, so if I stick it up here in the bag, it's not flowing down on its own. So we're going to try this consistency. It's definitely thinner than my last batch. It might be a little too thin, but we're going to cut a corner off and try pastry bagging it and seeing what happens. yeah, that's definitely not as thick as my other side, but I believe it's going to be plenty thick to hold itself in place. So I think this is actually a nicer consistency, in my opinion. Nice paste you can move around, but it comes out of the bag easier. As I predicted, this is the hardest, trickiest bit to get into in here, but did a pretty decent job. I think everything's tied in at least. It doesn't have quite as big of a blob around it as the other side does, but I can always throw some fiberglass in there if I want to. Smush it in. Strengthen things up. Ideally, this would have more resin on it, but that's what this is for here. That was smart. I would have done this before I put it in. Alright, my first batch, dry. Everything works great. Second batch, it's also dry. Worked fine on the bottom here, but at the top, you can see because it was a little bit more liquidy than my first batch, there's an area here right in there, possibly also because I didn't have as much mixed up, that it has slowly over time dropped down before it dried. So I'll probably have to put just a little bit more filler right along there. You know, something like this is fine. That's, you know, fine. The cloth can go down and then back up around. It's not a sharp corner, but that there's a pretty darn sharp corner. Okay, today's fiberglass layup is going to be this panel here, the kind of equivalent and opposite side panel there, and then this messy bit in here, which is why I have these slightly longer gloves. I suspect I'm still going to be getting epoxy off the hairs of my forearms, but we are going to be putting 2 layers in there, 2 layers in here, and 2 layers on here, all in one layup. Alright, this guy's all dry. While it was drying, I sliced the fiberglass that was hanging off the edges here when it was green. This guy here has 2 layers of 6-ounce fiberglass cloth on both sides of it, and it's significant strength here. It's going to be just fine for putting my drawer rail here for pulling a drawer in and out. These bigger guys have a single layer of 6-ounce fiberglass on one side of them, and you know, you can see them still wiggling around. I'm probably only going to need to reinforce the area from this back thing here down for load bearing purposes. So I may simply put cloth only on this part down around here and do just a single layer there, because I'm not going to be bolting anything to this guy here. And I will be putting things on the inside, obviously, as well. So now I'm going to sand it down a little and cut some more fiberglass. I just finished cutting 2 layers. This is the 6-ounce fiberglass cloth, and I did 3 sections each. So I do a section between these 2 walls, between those 2 walls, and between these 2 walls. And on each side it goes up the wall a little bit, and then it overlaps some here. So I'm going to have, here I have 2 layers, and then with this second layer up here I'll have 3-4 layers of overlap at each of these vertical uprights. So I'll have extra strength where these vertical uprights are. So I'm going to be putting down these set of layers, and then I have that one there to put down as well. Then I'm going to have 2 layers on this guy and that guy, and another 1 layer on this guy and this guy. I also have a little bit of this cloth tape cut to do around the top and bottom of these walls here and here. So that's going to be quite a long fiberglass layup, but by doing it all in one go, I won't have to sand between them, and hopefully the layers will gel together very nicely. I have finished putting down this 6-ounce fiberglass cloth. I have 2 layers over the entire back, the inside of the back here. I've also put an extra layer here, so there's 2 layers on each side of these 2 centerpieces here. And as you can see, I've also embedded these tubes. Each of these tubes is under 2 layers. And so all I need to do now is wait about 5 or 6 hours until this greens up, and then make a nice sliced edge, cutting off all this stuff on the edge. To give you an idea of the strength, this guy's got 2 layers of 6-ounce fiberglass on each side of it, and it's pretty sturdy. This guy down here has 2 layers on the top side, but nothing on the bottom. And it also has a longer span there, and so it's kind of wiggly. Now that'll be fixed when I put some layers on the back side when I do the rest of this. But this guy here, that's pretty sturdy right there. Today I'm going to be finishing these sidewalls. I'm going to do it in 2 parts because I have this board here. So I'm going to do 1 part above and then 1 part below. And I'm going to be doing 2 layers, so I'll have 4 pieces. I'll have 2 down here and 2 up here. So what this is eventually going to give me is 2 layers, and then I'm going to have actually 4 layers around this guy, and I'll have 4 layers in the overlapping area, especially below that board, and kind of I'll be wrapping extras around this board, so that'll give a little bit of extra structural support underneath that board. This side is a little trickier because I've already done the inside over here. I really only need to do the top part there. So I'm probably going to cut just a slot through this to about there and only come down to where the fiberglass is under here. It's a lot easier doing that now than with a reciprocating saw later.